I'd like to call the meeting of the Planning Commission of the Village of North Hudson on Wednesday, December 18th to order. And I guess we'll start with a roll call.
Member Anderson?
Present.
Member Bachman? Absent. Member DeCicero? Absent. Chair Howard?
Here.
Member Ryder?
Present.
Member Wanner?
Here.
Member Zeiss?
Here.
So we have a quorum. First item of business would be, I guess it's not as firstly, might be the second order of business, is the approval of the last minutes of November 20th. If there's anyone that would like to make a motion to accept.
I approve the minutes and go ahead.
Second.
Second, first and a second.
Yep.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved, and I'm opening the public hearing for the conditional use permit of Steve McFarland at End of Road Properties, LLC in Hudson, to develop garage condos at 207 Monroe Street North. Discussion and possible recommendation. So, I think this is an opportunity. We've heard your story, but I think we should address the microphone and kind of do it once again for this, this content.
So Steve McFarland, End of the Road Properties. Last time that we got together, I kind of gave you an overview of what we were planning on doing with what is referred to as Building 6 in the rail shop yard. And basically it's turning those into condominiums, garage condominiums. And we would like a conditional use permit. The accepted use is very close to what we're asking to do. However, if you look at the accepted use, it specifies like warehousing or storage for rent or lease. And we're actually talking about condos, so that's where the conditional use comes in. Other than that, you know, we'll be taking a building that was built sometime in the 1880s and renovating it. So bringing it up, cleaning it up, doing everything as far as the brick tucking goes, new roof on it, new asphalt and pavement, and hopefully bringing the building up to what would be modern day code and much larger asset to the town.
Are there any questions from the public that we have? It's kind of a public hearing, so this is your opportunity as a neighbor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Scott Snyder, 553 Galahad Road North. I live just across the street. I guess just for Plan Commission, the typical questions, hours of use, if there is, if it's applicable, traffic, I heard pavement, so consider the runoff. There's been a long history of water, stormwater in the village, Tim knows, in the shop yards. So to consider any runoff that's created by increased pavement. I think Plan Commission apply all the applicable federal standards, laws, county, state rules and ordinances that should apply in your conditions. Occupation, if it's truly just condos and storage, are they going to be maybe asking about any other activities that could go on besides just storage? Just to clarify that, I think it's a great concept, really supportive, but I think as a Plan Commission, you just need to ask all the typical appropriate questions for noise, traffic, lights, parking, runoff, electrical codes, and all the applicable ordinances that need to apply in your motion, that all that is stated. That's it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any additional comments based on what you just heard?
Well, so you've been a neighbor for probably the whole time I've owned the property, maybe, back 2014?
Hudson since 1962. I've been in North Hudson since 1988.
Okay. So you're aware of the improvements that we've already made in terms of the berm that runs along Galahad, and the area that we're talking about putting concrete and pavement down for was already, like when we went through the environmental cleanup and the improvements there, the areas that we're going to put pavement down on have already been classified as hard surface. and designated as pavement. So the pond, the holding ponds and the berms and things like that were put in place for eventual asphalt for
The
the,
holding pond would be the little wet area there on the trail.
on the north side, and then
Yeah, on the far
the
north.
large swale that we have
Yeah.
on the east side of the berm
Sure.
that holds water as well. So, and hopefully we've been a good neighbor. I mean, I know that there was a lot of things going on in there before we got in there. We put in a lot of the security systems and cameras. We started to work very closely with the North Hudson Police Department so that they would not only have access to our cameras, but also patrol the area more. And from what I understand, talking to the chief, the number of incidents in that little neighborhood have gone down quite a bit since we started doing that. And it's a small town, so just about everybody, the first couple of times that the police show up at your door because we caught you on camera and we got your license plate, and we're talking to your parents about how you're spinning, spinning out in the parking lot, that news gets around really quick, and that had a big impact on the number of kids that were back there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. So, yeah. And as far as everything else goes, as far as code and things like that go, I think one of the conditions tonight that we talked about at the last meeting would be that we get our permits, which would cover all of those things.
Let's Steve, talk about the operational side of it. I think you talked about an association that potentially could start setting those hours, or?
Yep, homeowners association. So you did ask about, like, is it gonna be storage or other things? One of the things that we would do is we would restrict it to private use, no commercial. We wouldn't allow somebody to buy one of these and set up a business in it, or a garage, like a shop or anything like that. So it'll be commercial use, similar to what people would do, in their own private yard, basically.
And no residential use either.
Right, you can't live in them.
I
So,
don't think the zoning probably even allows this.
no, but people like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Try.
yeah.
People will try and,
Right, yep. As far as lighting, so you asked about lighting too. As you know, when we did the expansion of the mini units, there was a lot of concern about lighting, and we implemented downlighting, LED downlighting. And I think that's worked really well. So we're not putting up big lights that, illuminate the neighborhood. It's more, in front of the doors and things like that, and it doesn't spread much. So,
Are you gonna offer a pre-sale period where you're gonna try to hit a break point before you start your project?
No.
For comfort, no?
no, we're pretty confident in this project. We've looked at other projects where we would start and kind of pre-sale and then kind of build them as we go. We're gonna invest in the building, and then we will build out 3 units inside the building. So those would be kind of models, if you will. And the reason we're not gonna build out the rest of the units inside the building is because there might be people that want two garages instead of one combined, or they might wanna do a drive-through, that type of thing. So, the vast majority of the work that's involved will be in the shell of the building. The actual interior, where we're kind of carving them up into individual units, that's actually the least amount of spend in this. A lot of the money is gonna go into the roof. That's gonna be, I don't know, somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000 to redo the roof on that building. A lot of money is gonna go into fixing all the brickwork. So those buildings have sat there for a long time without the brick being tucked. A lot of money is gonna go into the windows. So if you've been back there, everything is boarded up. So on the east end of the building, the 2-story part of it, there's gonna be a lot of work that goes into putting windows back into all of those boarded up pieces. So those are gonna be the larger expenses, and those we're gonna go ahead and do that with. I talked to Rob on the way in. I said, if we get the green light tonight, we'll actually start in on construction tomorrow. Apparently we don't need a permit to replace the roof. So as soon as you green light us, we're gonna start in on the construction with the roof. Then in parallel with that, we'll start the permitting process, and as soon as we get the permits for the rest of it, we'll start in. Some of it will be dependent on weather and how the winter goes, but there's some things that we can get going on pretty quick.
I mean, we're recommending board, the village trustees actually execute the approval. So just,
All right, yeah, that's right, I forgot the process.
So,
was-
I mean, I guess the drawings we have in our hands
Yep,
show the complete construction. And, I mean, I'm a little uncertain of what you will build initially.
So
and what will be built as a further development as it goes forward. So I don't know if you can.
So the drawing that you've got, you'll see that there are 20 units on that drawing. Everything on that drawing will be done except the 17. So if we go to the other page, it's this one. Yeah, so if you go to page A1, drawing A1, the individual units that are showing, the boats and the two trucks and the cars and things like that, those 17 units to the, what would be the west end of the building, won't be necessarily built exactly as drawn. So, and the change would be, if they bought multiple units, there would be one less wall. Okay, so for instance, if you look at the one that has the sailboat in it, if that person decided to buy 2 units, the wall to the left of that sailboat would be taken out. There wouldn't be a wall there.
But the exterior would look the same.
The exterior would be exactly the same. The roof is going to be the same. The end, the east end where the 2 stories is, that's all going to be done. So the only thing that's going to change is the size of those units. So at most, we'll have 20 units, and we could have as few as, maybe 10 if everybody doubled up, but I doubt that. It's going to be somewhere probably between 15 and 20 units. The first 3 units that'll be built out will be the small one that has the car in it, upper right-hand corner, the one to the left of that, and the one to the south of the car.
Those 3.
Those 3 will be our, what we'll call models.
So I'm putting a cloud around those 3.
Yep.
And each one will have water.
And the demising, and the corridor that would begin down the middle
That will be
only
done.
be constructed, or will that be constructed now?
The corridor will be constructed all the way down to the last 3 units. And the reason we're leaving the last 3 units is if somebody decides that they want pull-throughs, you could
You're talking about
combine
the
them,
last-
you can combine them that way, north
Talking
and
about the
south.
last 3 connected units, so 6
Yes.
entirely?
Yep.
So that gets built now.
The corridor will get built out right away, yep. You had a question?
That's going to be, I mean, I think there's an exiting issue there at that corridor. But I'm not going to be,
Well, the
Talk about it.
corridor will end, but it'll open up into an open space. So they'll still be able to use that exit on the west end.
we better check with your architect when you
Yep,
express that plan.
yep.
Because there may be a issue about exiting through a storage space to exit the space. So that,
Yep,
I'm
okay, yep.
just giving you a,
Yep.
kind of an internal, and so that wall happens up on the mezzanine as well, too. That demising wall would be built up to that point on the mezzanine?
Yes.
Got it, okay. That's why I was confused about that
Yep.
kind of phasing intention, and I understand your purpose in it, and it's
Yep.
certainly, I don't want to make it difficult,
No, right.
but I want to
yep,
make it, I want to understand the reality of it.
Yep.
Will your bylaws for the condo group allow for subletting of an owner after initial sale?
I believe it would, yes. Yep, but anybody that was sublet would be subject to the homeowners association rules and regulations.
So then related to the association rules, what type of actual, action can you take against violations for quick corrections or control? I mean, familiar with them in residential settings and multifamily. But for these, if you got somebody, running a shop, changing, definitely operating outside the parameters of intended use,
Yeah, it would be
then
the-
what type of corrective action can you actually take?
It would actually be similar to what you would do in a residential situation, where you can have fines, you can basically shut them out. You obviously would report them, so you could, depending on what the actual rules state in terms of what the remediation is, I would assume that if it was a severe or flagrant out-of-bounds use of the property, that you would report them to the authorities and potentially start eviction procedures.
Yeah, I mean, for a condo, the 2 typical remedies are going to be fines assessed by the condominium association, which then operate as a lien against the property. They can actually foreclose on that and just remove the person entirely because they're not following the rules, or seek an injunction, which is obviously more difficult, but it's also a remedy that they have available. And then to the extent that whatever the violation of the rules is also a violation of the law, like of the zoning code, they could report them to the local authorities for them to take enforcement action as well.
And do you have your bylaws drafted yet as far as what they actually look like and what type of structure is in them?
We don't yet, no.
Are you gonna follow any of them, the current ones, or any samples that are currently in place? Or the
Yep.
building inspector did at
Yeah,
least?
so the building inspector's already like started to school us on
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
we will probably use some of the most recent ones just from this area. Yes.
So one thing for this group to consider, if there's, a couple big conditions that you want in there, like no residential, no commercial businesses, I would suggest you add those to the conditions of the conditional use permit, because then, if for some reason someone's running a business in there, and the association just, well, we're not gonna spend the money to enforce it, then the village would have the power, because the village can't enforce the private covenants out there. But if it's in a condition of the conditional use permit, then that's, the zoning kicks in. And the village, if they wanted to, could enforce that. Something to think about when we're adding conditions, if we are tonight. There's a couple big ones.
Yeah, I've taken notes of those. And I think another condition that is the downlighting only, no broad beam
Yep.
broadcast lighting, so
Site storage,
that'll allow, yeah.
Not allowed.
yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
If you miss it here, the board's got another way at it. And
Yeah, this is just recommendations.
exactly.
Typically, this group does a good job, and the board supports what they say.
Any other further questions or comments from the?
So, let's go back to that list then. So if we put this in the cup, they don't necessarily have to have it in the association then, do they?
Well,
In their home?
they should.
I know they should, but I'm just saying, we can enforce something that we see, and
Well, these will be state approved plans, sign permit.
I understand they would, most likely they're going to put it in there, but that's just something they miss. We say, well, hey, it's in our cup,
Yeah, but typically, hopefully the enforcement's coming from the association,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not from the village.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
But to your point, though, the homeowner association is gonna have a catch-all line in there that says that they have to abide by all local rules and regulations. So whatever you,
Yeah.
Plus
whatever you do
Yeah.
is gonna be caught in that homeowner association agreement
Right.
anyway. I mean,
Yeah,
that's just a normal,
And I think you can trust to some extent that the whole association will enforce, because it just makes business sense from the association's point of view. Like, nobody who's a member of this association is going to want to have a machine shop running in the unit
No.
next door.
Right,
So
right.
the association has every reason to enforce these rules, because nobody wants this. If you spend $200,000 purchasing one of these units, you don't want to be in the situation where you're living next to somebody who's living in one of them or something.
Right,
like that,
right.
you know?
We just don't have anything like this in the village, so it's kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah, no, I totally.
Yep.
noise is the other, kind of unknown, engines and cars and.
yeah.
There is
well,
noise ordinances for the village that
Right,
will
yeah.
apply.
So in your past experience with these, have people utilized like pneumatic tools, air tools and stuff like that?
No, I mean, typically,
It's not
what you're looking at there is, I would consider that to be.
Or is there lifts in these?
There are lifts that some people put a lift in to stack their cars, but, there's not a lot of noise associated with those. Those are, and they're gonna be high-end. So again, kind of what Rory was indicated, these are gonna be pretty high-end units. I mean,
Yeah, but like
they're
for
not gonna be
him,
200,000, they're gonna be more like between $250,000 and $350,000.
I can listen to air tools all day coming from the storage. Someone's utilizing, not a business, but fixing their own stuff.
Right, no,
Noise ordinances.
yeah.
And I've got a neighbor with an air compressor. When he fires it up, I hear it.
Yeah, yeah, you can hear it.
I mean, if you got 20 of them going at the same time, that's a lot of air compressors going, but
Yeah.
it doesn't go on for very long.
Yeah.
Just blowing out his, lawnmower or something. And I get it, you know, I can get some air from them every now and then if I like it. We can do it, but,
Yeah,
I guess,
you want to read what we have here, I guess?
yeah, I think we can,
If there's no more.
no more
public
comments, we
comment,
can close the public hearing.
Yep, and then the board can discuss, and if
Yep.
they
So I
wanna make a
move,
motion, they can.
move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second. I guess I,
Yeah, you don't even have to vote, you can
no,
just.
okay,
close
we're
it.
closing the public hearing. So we have at the beginning of the list of possible conditions, property must pass a fire inspection. State approved, number one. Number two is state-approved plans must be provided to Tony Furhelm, building inspector, before a building permit can be issued. A sign permit must be issued by the building inspector prior to any signage being installed. Signs will be in accordance, in conformance with section 98-102 of the municipal code. I guess there was a line item, days and hours of operation, I don't think we will, I'm gonna cross that out for the time being. Plans must be submitted and presented to the Village of North Hudson Historic Preservation Committee prior to seeking village board appeal. No residential occupancy and no commercial operation in the units. Down lighting only, no overhead broad beam lights, and no outside storage.
So,
Does anybody have any other comments, or
Was that a motion?
Well,
that's the
before you do,
list?
So the
of
historic
conditions?
preservation condition, Paul and I have had some conversations about this. I mean, he and I have a.
Excuse me, could you go up to the microphone, please?
You bet.
Thank
Of course. So the village has a historic preservation ordinance. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this, but in addition to being, this building is a historic building in that it's listed on the Register of Historic Buildings, which is like a kind of a nationwide registry that's maintained of various sort of historic buildings. And we talked about it, the last hearing about, or the last meeting we had about how this building is on there, and there's other buildings in the sort of district or in this sort of train yard that are on the registry at a sort of more enhanced level, okay? But in addition to that, but that provides no restriction on the development of the building. But in addition to that, the City of North Hudson's ordinances, or the Village of North Hudson's ordinances, has this idea that you can have a historic preservation district within the village, okay? And if that happens, then you have to meet with the Historic Preservation Committee to have them kind of review and approve whatever is being proposed. The issue is, and I think Paul would agree with, Mr. Moll would agree with me on this, is that this train yard was never actually placed or designated as a historic district. And so it's not actually subject to the requirement of the ordinances that we have to meet with the Historic Preservation Committee. So as a matter of goodwill, I think we're willing to. I think we're happy to meet with them and talk to them and so on. But I don't believe that the ordinances allow them to hold up the conditional use permit. I mean, I think making them approving of the plans a condition of the conditional use permit is probably improper based on the fact that this train yard has never actually been designated as a historic district. Again, happy to meet with them, happy to talk to them about this, but I have reservations about making it a condition of the permit. I think Mr. Moll would agree with me that the area has never been designated as a historic district. I think people thought that it had been, but it never actually happened. And so consequently, I would ask that that not be made a condition of the permit. Now, as I said, we're happy to meet with them, but I have some concerns about, having to sort of dance to their tune if they had some concerns that, perhaps this board is not feeling. So I just want to mention that because I don't want it to become an issue if we can potentially avoid it.
So it's our local our local committee that has to list that as
yeah,
being
so I can tell you what's happened. Historically, when something's been done down there, they've come before this Historic Preservation Committee.
when you say down there. Yeah.
So I've owned the property for more than 10 years now. I've done a lot of stuff down there. including putting in an office building that we brought in, a prefab that we brought into that area and set it there. And in the 11 years that I've owned the property, I've never heard about this committee until this project. So I just want to, I want to object to the fact that traditionally people come in front of you. I've been in there for 11 years and I've never even heard about this committee until this project.
I guess traditionally, since I've been involved in the property that's adjacent, that's being renovated, they went through the process. And what Roy brought the issue up. And he asked, well, where was this designated, by the board? Because there's a whole process in the code about going through this and notifications and public hearings and creating plans. And we've been looking, the clerk's been looking through the records to see if this, it's one thing to make the ordinance, it's another to follow through with the ordinance and actually do it. And she hasn't yet found where the board and that committee actually did that. So whether or not it was done, I don't know. And that's where we sit. It's ambiguous whether or not it was done. And so, maybe the compromise here is have them voluntarily meet with this committee. Like I said, you can put it in as a condition, and we can fight about the enforceability of it if the board actually wants to follow through. We're just recommending here.
Yeah, the confusion part of it is that you're putting it in the ordinance. I mean, you put it in the cup, but you don't know what ordinance they're going to have to follow.
Well, the ordinance is
It
there.
says,
I mean,
some
Just
presentation.
whether or not the process was followed to
Followed through.
create it.
Okay.
Because it lays out in detail, and it says you're gonna form a historic committee, and the historic committee is gonna meet, and they're gonna come up with a plan for this historic district. There's gonna be a public hearing, and then the board's gonna adopt this plan. And then once that's done, if any changes are made to the building, they have to come to the committee before that's done, before they can get a building permit. And we don't know whether that process.
well, we don't know whether it happened, but ultimately, if it did happen,
Hold on. So to be fair, like you read the ordinance, it doesn't say anything about the railroad shops. It says that the committee will be formed and they will decide if there's any area in the village, any area
Yep.
in the village that should be designated as a historic district. Okay, and then it goes through very clearly the steps required to declare a historic district, which includes public hearings with the planning, with the Historic Preservation Committee.
Should be up there.
Which includes public hearings with the Preservation Committee, then a plan being developed, then all of that being submitted to the town board, the town having public hearings about that, and then voting on it and the plan. And there is zero evidence that any of that ever happened after the ordinance was put in place. So for me, who's greatly affected by this because I'm being told that I'm in a historic district, which comes with restrictions, I'm going to say no. Until you prove to me that that process was followed and the village actually adopted a historic district and that historic district is identified as where I have my buildings, I'm going to say no. The historic district does not exist. And therefore, I don't have to follow the ordinance.
And that's the question. And that's why the clerk's been looking through old boxes.
but it is a question. And I think because it remains unanswered, the conclusion is that it's not been designated as a historic district. Because if you're going to make us subject to that law, then I think it's your obligation to show that it applies to us. You can't simply say, oh, well, there's a question mark about it. If there's a question mark, then that's a question that the village has the burden to answer, as opposed to us show that it doesn't apply. Because I can never prove that it doesn't apply, because I can never prove a negative. End of the day, here's my suggestion. Here's what I think we can do. We're willing to meet with the committee voluntarily. Okay, we'll go in there and we'll talk to them about this. And I don't think we have an obligation to, but I recognize that property owners in the past have done that. And I think shows our good faith. I think it satisfies the village. I think there's people on that committee that like to be consulted and like to feel like they're being listened to, and we are absolutely responsive to that. So we're happy to meet with them. I just don't want to have it be a condition of the permit, because my concern there is that it's unknown. Okay, there's some uncertainty there, because they could come up with additional conditions that they think are appropriate, and then suddenly everything that we're doing here tonight is going to be undone because there's additional conditions being imposed by, you know, people who are a member of this historic committee who don't have the same kind of accountability as the members of this committee do. So again, happy to meet with them, but I would prefer that it not be made a condition of the permit. But we will just undertake to meet with them and talk to them about what they would like to see happen in the district. And if after that there's some unhappiness, let's say, about what's being proposed, then we can maybe sort of get to the argument about whether or not they have the ability to enforce the historic preservation ordinance. But I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think if we met with them, they probably won't have a problem with it. And so this entire conversation may be academic, but
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And I think, you know, whether everybody wants to draw a line in the sand tonight and fight about this and delay it, nobody wants to do that.
So Rob, we don't have motion on the table yet. We haven't.
We're still in conversation.
Yeah, we're still in conversation.
I think, you know, in my mind, if there's a historic district, it's this.
yes.
I'm just kind of, you can discuss whether it is or isn't, because it isn't designated as an official historic district, but there's no other place in the village that has any history like this.
I absolutely agree with you. I think when the ordinance, sorry.
I guess that's all, that's my only, because I'm not going to, you know, push on the fact that it's not a designated official historic district because it hasn't gone through that process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you know, I always think about it in terms of what are the effects of that as a historic place. And in my mind, I feel that the scale of the doors is one thing that may have some impact on that aesthetic on the north side, especially, not on the south side. I think the south side has a much better feel from a historic standpoint in relationship to the scale of the openings. So I don't know how you can, you know, think about that. But I think if you felt a way to ease that conversation in a communication with this committee, it might be to your benefit. But
I don't want to push back on that too much, but I hear what you're saying. I mean, I absolutely agree that obviously the ordinance was designed to apply to the rail yard, right? That's clear. But it never happened. And procedure does matter. And because it never happened, the place to have the conversation about whether or not this satisfies the sort of historic character of the neighbourhood is here and tonight, and not with some other group of people at some date in the future. Because it could have happened, but it never did happen. And so to the extent that, you know, the historic character of the neighbourhood matters, it's a conversation that is for this committee to make, or in making its recommendations. Because we can address it here, you know. I mean, we have it doesn't make sense it would never make sense for Steve to totally redesign the exterior of that building as a matter of business practice, because part of the appeal for these condos is going to be the fact that it has that historic look and feel, you know?
I agree.
Gentlemen, where do we go?
Well, that's, you know, that's a tough place for us to be in relation to the law.
Well,
Only because
eventually the board's going to decide. And it's not here. And I guess hopefully, you know, we can move it out of here with a recommendation and some conditions. And whether you take that condition out or you leave it in, the board can always do either one of those when it gets to there. And I guess what I would hope, and I don't know if timing would work, but to meet with that historic committee before the board meeting next month.
The board meeting is the 7th, I believe, isn't it? January 7th, a Tuesday?
On a, you know, on a voluntary basis, we'll
Yeah.
say. and get that input. I don't think, knowing what I've seen of the project and what I've heard from the committee in the past, I think there's some new members, I don't think there's gonna be a lot of changes. I mean, that's my view. I think you guys are doing a great job of preserving this thing and keeping that historic theme. But I think, these guys need an up or a down coming out of this meeting tonight from this committee.
Paul, would you agree with me that if we are subject to the historic preservation ordinance, then we're going to be subject to it whether or not it's a condition of the conditional use permit? True?
True, yeah.
So, in that sense, if we're subject to that ordinance, then it doesn't need to be a condition for the CUP because we're going to have to do it either way.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because the way the ordinance reads, you can't get a building permit until
Right.
it goes
Yeah,
through.
that's a good
So
point.
go meet them voluntarily. If there's an issue at that point, which again I highly doubt, then they'll probably direct Paul to send me a letter saying, okay, now we have a further issue because we have to go through comply with that portion of the ordinance, and then he and I can have a disagreement about whether or not it applies. But this committee tonight, I think, doesn't need to resolve that issue but if you make it a condition of the use permit, then you're making it an issue for us because then we don't know what's going to happen next until we meet with this committee.
But are we making it a condition of the permit, or are we simply stating that we're asking you before you meet with the village board, that you have met with the committee, which can be just a courtesy meeting, and report your findings? We're not saying that it's a condition that you have to have their approval. We're just saying that in the language that's presented here, that you will do it, but we're not saying you have to abide by it. We're not saying that you have to get our approval before. It's just a condition that you meet with them, get the ideas out there, have an exchange.
Sure.
And report your findings back to the board
The board. Yeah.
as a courtesy.
Okay.
What they want to do with those findings is their decision.
I'm perfectly happy for that to be the case.
And that's actually how this is.
So long as it's not a condition, so long as it's just, we agree that we'll go and meet with them and,
That's how the wording is.
okay.
It doesn't say that it's
Must
a
be
condition that
submitted.
you must meet their approval of something before.
It's
Just a,
The conditions as read, it says, plans must be submitted to the Village of North Hudson Historic Preservation prior to seeking village board approval.
We're doing submitting plans to them, and
Yep.
there's no condition about what they do with them. I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Not
It's
asking-
it's your decision, I can't make it for you.
I mean, don't you?
Yeah, I agree,
Yeah,
totally.
I think that's a good
Yeah.
point, Bill. Really well
I
said.
mean, it's good discussion what we had here, but the ordinance is in place.
And I don't think it's our place to get in the middle.
No, right.
Okay.
But I don't think that there's gonna be, from what I've seen, what I think of this,
I think there's one representative off the current board, and then there's two people that were,
I would think something could
history.
get scheduled.
yeah.
Yeah.
Rob?
So,
I would also, I would add these conditions.
yes,
Yes.
yeah, that's what I'm reading, yeah.
Yep.
So I have this list, I'll read them again, and then we'll take a vote for
Yeah, just- you could just
approval.
put it in a form of a motion.
Yeah, I guess I'll read them as that. I'll make the motion. So I'll move for the recommendation for approval with these conditions for the project in question. That property must pass a fire inspection. State-approved plans must be provided to Tony Fierhelm, building inspector, before a building permit can be issued. A sign permit must be issued by the building inspector prior to any sign being installed. Signs shall be in conformance with section 98-102 of the municipal code. Plans must be submitted/presented to the Village of North Hudson Historic Preservation Committee prior to seeking village board approval. Project shall have no residential occupancy and no commercial operation. The lighting for the project shall only be down lighting and no overhead broad beam lights, and no outside storage.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks.
All right. Thank you. If you have a second, can I chat with you for 1 second before we'll just close out here. And are there any other routine business items? Hearing none,
Make a motion to
I
adjourn.
would make, you making a motion? A motion has been made to adjourn, a second?
Second. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you, gentlemen.